This week, to be closer to China, illicit drugs endanger not only the health of the individual, but also the prosperity of the community and even the stability of society. China today faces debilitating and addicting drugs, including heroin, methamphetamine, ecstasy, marijuana, and cocaine. Why has China's drug problem been getting worse?
Objectively, the upgrade in purifying technology is making drug production easier and more readily available, and the development of better logistics is lowering the risks of drug trafficking, which enables higher accessibility to drugs.
What are the international ramifications? What is the government doing to combat illegal drugs?
China demonstrates a clear strategy in line with the international strategies. Generally speaking, China has maintained a tough stance on drug abuse and trafficking. I think it works for China.
This week, China's approach to drugs takes us closer to China. To foreigners, especially to Americans, China is a drug-producing country, not a drug-consuming country. This stereotype is wrong. China fought the Opium Wars in the 19th century to stop the British from selling opium from India and keeping the Chinese people intoxicated and docile. Today's China, although master of its own destiny, faces new kinds of debilitating and addicting drugs, including heroin, methamphetamine, a synthetic stimulant, MDMA, ecstasy, morphine, cannabis, marijuana, cocaine, and other narcotic and psychoactive substances. Until several years ago, China's problem with hard drugs was limited largely to heroin use in poor provinces, especially those nearest to the Golden Triangle poppy fields of Southeast Asia, such as Yunnan province. Illicit drugs now are also cooked up in illegal Chinese laboratories. Today, a quiet epidemic of drug addiction affects all areas of China. In 2017, China's National Narcotics Control Commission reported 2.5 million heavy drug users. A Brookings Institution's report had the number of officially registered drug users increasing every year between 1998 and 2016. Roughly half are addicted to heroin, over 80% are male, and most worrying, over 70% are under the age of 35. Why has China's drug problem been getting worse? What are the international ramifications? What is the government doing to combat illegal drugs? We find out to be closer to China. In the beginning of the 19th century, in order to obtain vast profits, British businessmen opened up an illegal opium trade in China. Within 3 to 4 decades, China had shipped about 400,000 crates of opium to China. By the end of the 1830s, opium had caused devastating damage to the Chinese people. In 1839, the imperial minister Lin Zexu called for the destruction of confiscated opium, and for 23 days, smoke was seen hovering over the beach of Humen as seized opium burned. This event is remembered as the Humen Opium Destruction and represents an early public backlash against drugs in China. After the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, the country launched a massive campaign to eliminate opium, which had inflicted such woe and misery for over a century. But in the late 1970s, as China opened up to the outside world, the drug problem resurfaced. Due to the proliferation of international drugs crossing the border and domestic factors, drug problems in China became more complex and drug damage became more severe. At present, the drug problem is one of the vital factors affecting China's social stability, economic development, and ultimately, the lives of its people. What's the current state of drug-related problems in China?
The word that officially used to describe the current situation is most often used words are severe and complex. I think these are quite accurately characterized current situation in the drug use in China. and also drug-related crimes in China.
总体上看呢，我国当前的毒品形势依然严峻复杂。
Generally speaking, we still face a grim anti-drug battle, with border drug smuggling on the rise, ever-mounting domestic drug production, and widespread drug abuse with grave societal consequences. Affected by a global drug pandemic and multiple domestic factors, we face a complicated landscape with 3 generations of drugs closely intertwined, which are the following. Traditional drugs like heroin remain a daunting problem that is difficult to be eliminated. Synthetic drugs dominated by methamphetamine and ketamine are spreading like a virus. And new psychoactive substances are emerging as new outstanding problems, which are manifested by an increasing number of drug users, higher availability of drug sales, easier access to non-drug users, and a sustained high level of first-time drug users.
Why are drug problems still on the rise in China? What are the internal and external causes?
目前呢，我国的
Today, both objective and subjective factors are leading to growing drug use. Objectively, the upgrade in purifying technology is making drug production easier and more readily available, and the development of better logistics is lowering the risks of drug trafficking, which enables higher accessibility to drugs. Subjectively, anti-drug awareness by the general public remains relatively low. There is inadequate knowledge of the damage that drugs can inflict on the society and the individual, plus the drug subculture. These have served as a fertile ground for the drug epidemic.
What new challenges will China's drug control work face in this new era of high technology and high connectivity?
As for new challenges, I just mentioned the ever-increasing of new types of psychoactive substances cropping up. Some 50% of such substances, or even more, are found in China. China is highly wary of this. I believe it poses as the biggest challenge. The second challenge is the rise of the Internet. We know China has a relatively good control of the Internet, but it is not the case abroad. You can leave no trace on the dark web, where people can buy or sell anonymously with virtual currency. It poses as a daunting challenge in terms of reducing supply.
Located in China's southwest, Yunnan province shares a border of more than 4,000 kilometers with Myanmar to the west and Laos and Vietnam to the south. Due to its geographical location and lack of natural barriers on its borders, exchanges between people across its borders have grown more frequent, thus placing Yunnan province on the front lines of the drug war in China. Statistics from the Information Office of the Public Security Department of Yunnan Province reveals that in 2018, Yunnan police cracked down on illicit drugs by bringing more than 12,000 criminal cases, arrested over 12,000 drug suspects, and seized over 28 tons of illegal drugs. In recent years, because of the lure of high profits, many domestic and foreign drug dealers have taken risks and attempted to traffic drugs into the country through China's border regions. For this reason, soldiers at the frontiers, at the forefront of the anti-drug war, have been facing tremendous challenges and pressures. Border areas in China are often worst hit by drugs. What are the regional characteristics of drug problems in these high-risk areas, and how to deal with local drug problems?
In
recent years, drug trafficking through the southwestern border has remained prominent. Drugs from Taiwan coming in through the southeastern coastal areas have been rising sharply, while trafficking through the northeastern border has seen a decline. In summary, there are 5 features: a domination of drug trafficking, sales, and transportation, global organized professional and intelligent illegal operations, bulk drug dealers taking a lion's share, an increase in gun-related drug crimes, and extremely high secrecy. China's National Narcotics Control Commission launched a special campaign to crack down on border drug trafficking and smuggling. China's participation in the Greater Mekong Sub-Region Cooperation is a great success story. A comprehensive regional law enforcement system has taken shape, encompassing border liaison officer programs, regular meetings between law enforcement on both sides of the border, criminal intelligence and information sharing, joint operations, patrols and surveillance, and special trainings for law enforcement officers.
What's the relationship between poverty and drugs? Is poverty alleviation essential for drug eradication, especially in areas near China's southwestern border?
Poverty is related to all social problems. For example, a poor farmer could grow opium poppies that bring higher profits than growing crops. So it is poverty-related. It is a root cause.
Being impoverished, some drug dealers risk their lives to produce or traffic drugs in pursuit of a better life. Some people living in less developed areas see drug smuggling as their top choice to escape poverty.
So to thoroughly reduce the drug problem, attacking the poverty in those regions, to helping those people to find a different source of income, different, through the normal cultivation of good crops would definitely help. For example, China has put a lot of efforts in helping the neighboring countries such as Myanmar, such as Thailand, Laos, in the northern area of those countries, to develop a different kind of products for different kind of crops.
Drug control concerns national security, the rise and fall of the nation, and the well-being of the people. In 2005, drug control was established as a basic national policy of China. Over the years, in its fight against drug-related crimes to reduce the supply and demand of illegal drugs, the Chinese government has sought to control areas of drug cultivation, curb drug sources, strengthen drug education and prevention, and raise public awareness about drugs. In addition, to facilitate former drug addicts to return to society, the government has stressed drug treatment and rehabilitation. The fight against drugs will not cease, China vows, until drugs are totally eradicated. On June 25, 2018, President Xi Jinping gave instructions on anti-drug work, stressing drug control with Chinese characteristics and resolutely winning the people's war against drugs in the new era. With respect to drug control, which aspects reflect Chinese characteristics?
China's anti-drug campaign is characterized by 6 features, namely education for drug abuse prevention, management and control of drug users, combating drug crimes, the regulation of precursor chemicals, monitoring the overall drug situation across the board, and global anti-drug cooperation.
China demonstrates a clear strategy in line with the international strategies. Generally speaking, China has maintained a tough stance on drug abuse and trafficking. I think it works for China.
China has a very highly integrated society, families and communities, friends. Those relationships are very highly emphasized among Chinese daily life. And also, China has a government that has a stronger, I would say, the higher level of governance capacity. China is a very tightly organized government, and every aspect, people have this tradition of relying on government. And these kind of ideas, this kind of tradition, also helps government, helps society to organize their anti-drug war against the drug crimes.
The problem is that people want to get treatment but are unlikely to seek help. People without money are deprived of the appropriate treatment, including the psychological support to prevent relapsing. It is also a significant problem for people who want to reintegrate into society but are confronted with stigmatization and marginalization. In China, we take strict measures. Drug abusers are registered with their ID information wherever they go. If their ID is required, their identity as drug abusers is also revealed, so it is easy to control. Second, they must stay in their communities and must report to authorities if they leave their community. In addition, regular urine drug tests are carried out as a significant deterrent. This is what we mean by so-called all-around management and control. Besides these measures, we also need to provide them with a way out, which is critical. Without a way out, the management and control won't be that effective. Thus, community-based rehabilitation matters a lot. It is also critical to make psychological treatment and social support available, since they need to shelter and feed themselves and to work.
How do you view the highest statutory penalty for drug crimes in China? The issue of human rights violations linked to drug control has gradually attracted the attention of the international community. How could the relationship between human rights protection and drug control be understood and coordinated?
The Chinese culture tends to emphasize the general deterrence effects, which means the death penalty could, in most Chinese citizens' view, deter some of those people who commit crimes, the most serious crimes. And also, in practice, putting a death penalty into the law doesn't mean, carry out many death penalties. If you check out the changes over the past years, China is carrying out less death penalty. And also, China's Supreme Court has taken back the power to determine the death penalty, case by case. So every case that was given a death penalty is rigorously reviewed by the Supreme Court.
We believe that people are the core of drug control, be it prevention, rehabilitation, or legal punishment. A comprehensive manner involving legal, economic, moral, and social factors would serve as the best way to curb the spread of drugs from the source. Protection, assistance, and punishment represent different ways, not contradictions to each other. We do not overstress a single method and believe a systemic and scientific treatment method would strike the balance between human rights protection and drug control.
The world drug problem is a prime concern for the World Health Organization.
The global drug problem broadly continues to spread as drug manufacturing, trafficking, and abuse is on the rise. Intertwined with international terrorism and organized crime, the drug problem, especially in vulnerable areas, threatens regional security and stability. Within this deteriorating global environment, China's anti-drug fight has become more complex. Infiltration of foreign drugs in particular has become a serious issue. Keeping drug sources from entering the country has become a major factor affecting drug control in China. Controlling drugs is not a problem that can be solved by a single country. Solutions will depend on the joint efforts of all countries. In the past 20 years, with the development of its comprehensive national strength, China's participation and influence in international drug control has been increasing. In this new era, what new focus, new forms of cooperation will China have in promoting international cooperation in drug control? What's its significance for China and for the world?
I believe we cannot overstress the importance of international cooperation. The drug problem is far from being the concern of a single country. Drugs know no boundary. From this perspective, international cooperation is crucial. We have 3 main international drug control conventions that serve as the foundation for international cooperation. Over 190 countries, including China, are part of these conventions. So first of all, we must do that which is in accordance with these international conventions and denounce actions that go against the conventions.
Amidst the emerging drug issues, China's participation in the existing international anti-drug regime mainly falls into the following 3 categories. First, as a cooperation mechanism at the UN level, such as the United Nations Commission on Narcotic Drugs and heads of national drug law enforcement agencies for Asia and the Pacific. Second, as a multilateral anti-drug cooperation mechanism with East Asia and Southeast Asian regions, such as the Safe Mekong Joint Operation with the Law Enforcement and Security Cooperation Mechanism along China, Laos, Myanmar, and Thailand sections of the Mekong River. Third, as a bilateral anti-drug cooperation mechanism, that is, agreement, protocol, or MOUs on anti-drug efforts signed with other countries to carry out comprehensive cooperation in law enforcement, intelligence sharing, demand reduction, and alternative development, among others.
China's presence has to some extent deterred actions against the three main international conventions adopted by the UN. For example, Canada legalized marijuana. China, together with other Asian countries, criticized such actions and made our voice heard through adequate cooperation and exchange with INCB and UNODC. I believe it is inevitable for our voice to get stronger.
How do you view the U.S. opioid crisis that is causing increasing concern among American leaders and the American public?
It is not overstated to call it a public health crisis. The Americans tend to blame others once problems occur instead of self-reflection. They say it was caused by fentanyl from China. In a closer analysis, what are the root causes? First, the U.S. faces an overprescription of opioids. Reasons vary. Inappropriate publication of drug factories and research is not well done. Oxycodone, for instance, is overprescribed. Since opioids serve as pain relievers, they are therefore indispensable for medicine. The U.S. satisfied the needs at 3,600%. That is 36 times of the actual needs. In other words, the prescription leads to drug abuse, which results in overdose that led to death. The government felt responsible to control opioids and caught the people who prescribed them, making doctors hesitant to prescribe such drugs. What could the addicts do? They could only resort to the black market, replacing it with such drugs as heroin and fentanyl, thus resulting in fentanyl and heroin overdoses. It is a demand and supply issue. As long as there is demand, there must be supply. Where did the supply come from? We know China is good at chemosynthesis, so a very small part of the fentanyl drugs might come from China. But I would like to emphasize that no milligram or microgram of fentanyl is exported to the U.S. via the legitimate channel, but the black market.
On April 1st, 2019, China announced the control of all fentanyl-related analogs. How to understand the innovation of this initiative? Can it effectively prevent the abuse of fentanyl substances and promote the work of drug control in China and in the world?
I think that really is a good invention, because one of the major difficulties with these newer psychoactive drugs, particularly fentanyl, is that the drug dealers or the drug producers can manage to make a little bit variation in the chemical structure of the drug, and the drug will no longer be listed in the law as prohibited. So China considers this particular situation based on the convention of the law. Typically, we have a principle of legality when making a law. That means the actions that is a crime has to be very carefully specified. In the case of the felony, if you specify those 20 as drugs, as prohibited drugs, and the producer can make slight change in chemical structure, for example, right? And then the new products will no longer be illegal anymore. Okay, so with these new psychoactive drugs, similar things can be done in many other drugs. Therefore, making a law never catch up how to attack this, catching up the attacking of those, prohibiting those drugs. This is actually a problem not only in China but in many other countries too. The law cannot go as fast as the drug producers. Therefore, China invented this idea of whole class listing. Specify anything that has that has a potential of being produced and has the drug effects will be considered prohibited.
由此可见，
We can see that China is actively engaging in the global governance of drug control as a responsible player, which also echoes international cooperation in drug control proposed by the National Narcotics Control Commission. Different from other controlled substances, newly listed ones like the fentanyl class see a short cycle. From discovery and early warning, they'll get listed as controlled substances, which is determined by their intrinsic spreading characteristics. After the listing, the upcoming enforcement and legal publications should also be paid close attention to.
Regarded as the invisible killer, addicting drugs not only endanger the physical and mental health of the individual, but also tear apart families, shatter social stability, hinder economic development, and even threaten national security. Drug control in China has a long history. From the first ban on drugs in 1729 to the destruction of opium at Humen in 1839, from the national anti-drug campaign after the founding of the People's Republic of China to the current People's War against drugs in the new era. Over the years, China has upheld UN anti-drug standards: supply control, demand reduction, harm reduction. China has followed the principles of source regulation, people-centered orientation, legal governance, strict management, and comprehensive control, and has stressed drug education and prevention, drug rehabilitation and social return, drug-related crime crackdown, severe punishment for drug dealers, and drug regulation, monitoring, and control. Moreover, China has increased its international collaboration, announcing that all variants of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid linked to thousands of drug overdose deaths in the U.S., will be treated as controlled substances. But still, China's drug problem has been getting worse. Why? The question cannot be avoided. Part of the answer for China is the same answer it is for other countries. The sophistication of drug trafficking combined with young people who have high curiosity and low awareness and may be exposed to drugs in disguise. China has always handled drug control through its law enforcement apparatus. Perhaps China should experiment with a public health approach for treating drug addicts. Just as China is doing so successfully for its anti-poverty campaign, China can be more targeted for its anti-drug campaign. This can mean community-based treatment with a continuum of care and targeted protocols for first-timers and repeated offenders, helping drug addicts to return to society. It could also mean humanistic approaches, such as methadone therapy clinics and needle exchange programs to prevent the spread of hepatitis and HIV. Drug control with Chinese characteristics is a long and arduous war. That's closer to China.